Hey there, Buck Bookers, and welcome to a very special Buck's Books. Today we got Beefy back here with us. He's lurking. And today we're going to be talking about a book called Hollow by B Catling. I was told, and I know I've been telling this story a lot, I was told that this book would be similar to Between Two Fires. Now, if you joined us last time, you saw my review of 5 books that were not Between Two Fires, but were in fact less Catholic than Between Two Fires, because there are no books that are more Catholic than Between Two Fires. And I enjoyed all of those books to some degree. I cannot say the same for Hollow. Also, it was not very much like Between Two Fires. So I understand where they thought the similarity was going to come from, because it was medieval and it was alleged to be horror. The problem is it felt sort of like a Beetlejuice horror situation, where it's like got the horror elements, so you know it's spooky ooky, but it was more of like a hot topic, like Halloween haunted house scary, like camp. It was campy, but it wasn't trying to be campy. It was trying to be like Dadaist. It was trying to be surreal and nightmarish. There were 3 main plots running at the same time. And the first one was the only interesting one, which was essentially Blood Meridian, only medieval, and with a ghoul in a box. So I'm never going to review Blood Meridian because I didn't like it, but I did like the motifs that they used in Blood Meridian, and that translated correctly into Hollow. There were a lot of similarities, and the way they were all these scumbag outlaws, and they were hired for this job by the church specifically because they were scumbag outlaws, and they needed scumbag outlaws to bleed on bones, preferably human, but they could also be animal, or not bleed, but rather confess to them, confess their sins. And this charges the bones, the Pyx, Pyx. I don't know why. And then they had to feed those charged sin bones to the Oracle. And the Oracle was this grotesque little ghoul that existed in a box, and it was never clearly described, or if it was, the description was not good enough for you to ever really get an idea of what it looked like, except like withered and hunched. So I sort of pictured like a little dried corpse in a fetal position, little gross, little crusty beef jerky golem looking guy rolling around in there. There was an episode of Ren and Stimpy where Ren befriended what was a corpse. Like they dressed it up as like a bug scarecrow or something, but it was a corpse. Ren was hanging out and talking to a corpse in this cave where he had one of the many madnesses that he contracted over the course of the show's run before it got canceled, probably for featuring so many madnesses and corpses. And that is essentially, like, I pictured a grosser version of that. I'm sure I can pull up a picture and put it like over here, maybe over here. I don't know what side it's going to be on yet, but that was the Oracle. And the plot there was that all of these ne'er-do-wells were charged by the church with delivering the Oracle to some abbey or other, some church-relevant location, where it would be sealed into a wall or something. And I need you to understand that I did pay attention during this book. I read this one with my hands and my eyes. It was my bedtime book. It was what I'd read before bed. So the ones that I read before bed, I tend to scrutinize very closely, because I eat them up a little bit at a time. As opposed to the audiobooks, where sometimes I will miss parts if I'm not paying attention, if I'm doing something else, and I'll have to go back. For Hollow, I tried very hard to figure out what was going on. I just don't think it was very clearly communicated. And that's because the author had a passion for absurdist prose. He wanted very badly for it to be surreal and like almost to the level of nonsensical. He really enjoyed his obscure turns of phrase. He liked to make it weird and like uncomfortable. Like the phrasing he chose was deliberately uncomfortable when you read it. And that's what he was after. It was supposed to be jarring. It was supposed to evoke that level of, it's like a movie in the score, you know, how they're playing all the screechy noises in the background all the time so you feel uncomfortable. He was trying to do that, only he was trying to do that with his choice of words. And it kind of worked. It worked for that subplot. I'll say that. It worked for the ripoff of Blood Meridian. But it did not work for the rest of the book, and it did not make anything that happened clear or concise. You didn't really know what was going on for a lot of it, which was very annoying. The second subplot was a bunch of pretentious monks in the abbey who were like being monks. It was very boring. They were just doing monk stuff. There was some other entity sealed up in the wall, but this also was not explained at all. And sometimes it screamed, and the scream made somebody fall down, and then they had to go to a different town, and another monk was rude, and they talked about the rudeness, and the one guy had like a screwed up lip, so it would keep catching, so he'd talk, and there'd be too many F sounds. All the S sounds would turn into Fs because of his weird lip, and yeah, okay. But we don't need to devote 33% of the book to that. It was very... I don't know what he was trying to do. I don't know why he thought it required that much background. I don't know if he was just trying to fill up the book. It was 272 pages. So, I mean, at least 80 of them were devoted to that tedious subplot. But I think that was the only means they had of connecting Hieronymus Bosch into what was going on, and this book went hard for Hieronymus Bosch. And that's why I say it wasn't really horror. It's like it tried for the disturbing. The world is overrun by gross little demons. Sometimes they're called woebegons, sometimes woebegone? Woebetide? I think it's woebegone. Sometimes they're called filthlings, but they're basically just the goofy little runner around guys from the Hieronymus Bosch painting, the Garden of Earthly Delights. And the people have just kind of adapted to these circumstances, and a lot of them just kill them, but they steal hats and they talk, and it's very silly, it's goofy, it's like the Brave Little Toaster. So he's trying to make it scary, but it's not scary, it's just weird. But it's not the kind of weird where you're scared. It's not even the kind of weird where you're really uncomfortable. You're just like, huh. And like, huh is not an emotion that can drive 272 pages of plotting horror, in my humble opinion. And the monks were the only ones with any education. So they were the ones who knew who Hieronymus Bosch was and could have opinions on art and how it was heretical and demonology on some level, because why would Hieronymus Bosch picture all these horrible things and then animate them? Because if an artist animates something, then he brings it into the world, and that's a means of conjuration, even if it doesn't actually physically make them into being. It makes them like a tulpa, it creates the idea in other people's eyes and perceptions and mind, and then these magicians can proceed to pull these in the world, and that into the world. And that is the third subplot. It is a peasant woman who is old and ugly and mean. And she has an old, ugly, mean husband. And they hate each other, and they just kind of plot around doing old, ugly, mean things. And she was friends with a witch, and they burnt the witch. And before the witch, as the witch burnt, the witch imbued the tertiary protagonist with her witch juice, the witch power, the juju. And it was implied that this witch or other witches were the reason for all these woebegottens, woebetides, the greasy little gremlins who are running around. And like they're described with as pumpkins with faces and big hands. It's just it read Disney. You know, it wasn't enough to drive horror. It wasn't enough to be called horror. But if it's not horror, what is it? Because it's trying to build tension, but for it to be tense, you need to be afraid of something. And if you're not afraid of anything, then it's not building to anything. So it's nothing but build. With no result, with no destination. And that is essentially what the book was. I read all of the pages of it, and I was very excited for something to happen. And there were brief periods where things happened. There was a giant for a moment. There was a demon. They named a demon. She was some sort of sexy snail creature that one of the scumbags disappeared into. He was just in there just like touching in the shell. Again, not very clearly defined. Touching in the shell, and he was very happy. And then he broke the demon's spell, and then we just never heard from him again. He probably died. I don't know. Everybody really died. Everybody in the scumbag crew died. And like in stupid ways. But like I'm calling them the scumbag crew because none of them have names. Nobody was really worthy of a name the whole book. There were no characters to connect to. The reason this is a very special Bucks Books is because normally I write the review on Goodreads first, and I use that as a means of figuring out what I'm going to say in the Bucks Books. This time I'm doing it the other way around because I don't have it's okay, it's not NaNoWriMo anymore, but I am invested in a fantasy novel, and fantasy novels need to be around 100,000 words, which is twice what's expected for NaNoWriMo, so I'm doing like a double NaNoWriMo. And as a result, I haven't had time to fart around on my YouTube channel. But I would not deny you, the loyal viewers, the opportunity to learn about books that I don't like. We're all here for the same reason. So I figured I'd make this one. And there you go. This is a book I didn't like. I don't think Hollow was very good. If I had to give it stars, and I do, because I'm going to put it on Goodreads eventually, I would give it 2 stars. And that's being generous. And the 2 stars are because dude could turn a phrase. Like, yeah, a lot of nothing stuck with me. Nothing he said, like, he didn't. There are books I'll read them and I'll hit a line and I'll be like, ooh, that's a good one. Fact, top of my head, I don't even remember the name of the book. It was called like The Assassin's Apprentice or something like that. It was in 70s or 80s sci-fi fantasy book. And the one character said, where is it? There is better theology in flowers than in folios. And that one resonated with me because I got a chunk of stone over there hanging on the wall that I found at a thrift shop that says, it's a Dante Alighieri quote. It says, La natura e le arti di Dio. Pardon my lack of an Italian accent. I don't actually know how to speak it. But it means nature is the art of God. And I liked that a lot. So that line stuck with me. 0 lines from Hollow stuck with me. Not a 1. But despite that, it was passable fare. The way he wrote, like it was the kind of thing. The writing, it's weird because the story sucked. But the writing was worth following through just because it was so unusual. And that's almost always the opposite. It's almost always the other way around. You forgive the writing, whatever flaws it might have, because all writing will have flaws, because the story is good. The story wasn't good. Nothing happened in the story. I don't know why it was written or what the point of it was. I will never read anything else by Brian Catling again. And I am going to stop working from this list. Reddit has betrayed me so many times. The only book from that entire list that was any good was The Vagrant. And I'm excited to read the rest of The Vagrants. But, lesson learned. Don't trust a Redditor. It's not even a hard lesson to learn. Just don't trust a Redditor. It's obvious stuff. If they're on Reddit, if they're posting on Reddit, odds are their opinion, as far as taste is concerned, is worthless. Like, you can go there and find information. Like, there's nerds on there. Nerds will teach you things. But, like, if you want Reddit to give you their recommendation, you got to consider the source. And the source is Reddit. So picture what a Redditor is in your mind. And think, do I want that guy to recommend me a book? Even if I'm hyper-specific about what kind of book I want. And the answer is no. So I have no one to blame but myself. 2 stars. Don't read it. Unless some of that sounded good for some reason. In which case, read it. I don't care. Thank you for tuning in to my very special Bucks books. I will probably update within the week because I have been tearing through books pretty good. I just haven't gotten a chance to review any of them. All right. You like what you see? Like, follow, subscribe. You know the drill. Talk to you next time.